More than 12,000 students walking through the Smart Forest Student Summit this week at the International Manufacturing Technology Show here in Chicago, Illinois at McCormick Place. It is the largest show of its kind in the Western Hemisphere. Millions of people walking through the big show and seeing the most advanced manufacturing technology on offer. More than 15,000 new technologies available to see here at IMTS. We talk all the time on the Tech Ed podcast, of course, about the importance of inspiring the American dream for the next generation and about inspiring students of all levels toward careers in STEM and advanced manufacturing. And by all levels, we mean all levels. It is amazing when you think about it, how much experiences influence our young people's career pathways when they're really, really young. And it can start as early as middle school. And there's research that tells us that students don't necessarily choose what they want to do when they're in middle school. Very few fourth or fifth graders say, I want to do X, but they can, in some cases, start turning off to specific career opportunities when they're really young. And then when we try and get them excited in high school, it is way too late. Our next guest is doing amazing work at getting young people, and especially those in fourth and fifth grade, excited about careers in STEM. And that is why it is my pleasure, as Matt Kirkner, the host for the Tech Ed podcast, to introduce our guest. She is the co-founder and co-executive director of SparkShop. Her name is Tiernan Murrell. Tiernan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
So tell us about the mission and the work that you do at SparkShop. I'm so excited to hear about it.
Yeah, so SparkShop's mission is to inspire the next generation of engineers, inventors, entrepreneurs. That is what we are trying to do, is to let kids experience the technical fields for themselves when they are still young enough that they are forming their opinions about themselves and who they can be.
So when we started in the introduction talking about how certain students, and it's actually interesting, especially young girls or girls in the fourth and fifth and sixth grade, can start turning off to certain career pathways. In other words, they're not saying I'm going to be I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a nurse, but they might say, engineering, maybe that's not for me, or a STEM career or manufacturing, maybe that's not for me. Do I have that right? Are you hearing the same things?
Absolutely. And something that we found in our research when my co-founder Shanali and I were first starting up our nonprofit, and when we were deciding where can we make a big impact. We're two people, we're trying to join into the STEM education field, which is something that has a lot of really skilled organizations in it already.
Right.
What makes us think we can do something different? Something we discovered is that in developmental psychology, people begin to form their sense of self around their academic performance, right around fourth and fifth grade.
Wow.
So you're not going to see a second grader say, I'm a math kid, I'm an artist.
Interesting.
That starts to emerge in fourth and fifth grade, and those identities that you form at that age persist throughout your life.
Huh, that's really fascinating to me. So it's not just like your experiences, which are obviously really, really important, but it's this whole idea that how you're performing academically in fourth or fifth grade almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So I had a fifth grade teacher. Actually, it was funny. I struggled, and I talk about this all the time on the podcast. Struggled all the way through school with being a classroom learner. I just was never a classroom learner. And I had a fifth grade teacher. At the end of the year, you take the standardized test, right? And back then, they're different now, but this was quite some time ago. You take the standardized test, and it would give you a score. And he came up to me at the very end of that after we got the results, because back then you'd have the little Scantron, and you'd fill it out with your number 2 pencil, and then it would get shipped away to someplace in Iowa, and 2 months later or whatever, you'd figure out what they found out. And he sat me down and he said, first of all, you got the best score of anybody in the entire fifth grade, and I was not a good student, right? And he's like, so you can look at this one of two ways. He said, you can either look at it that you're really smart, or that you just totally wasted an entire year of school, is what he said. I said, you know what? I think I'll pick the first way. Let's go with that. But what you're telling me is that if I am a fourth grader, if I'm a fifth grade student, my whole sense of identity and what's possible for me is going to be defined by my academic performance.
It's a component of it, yeah. And I think one of the things that is a great opportunity for fourth and fifth graders is just showing them truly the diversity of fields out there.
Sure.
Because in my own personal story, I grew up a science kid. I always
Okay.
loved science. I always
Yeah.
loved biology. I didn't want to be a doctor.
Okay.
I am very squeamish. I've known my whole life I don't want to be a doctor.
You would not have liked our last guest, by the way, but keep going.
Okay, yeah, I believe that. And people have told me, oh, you'll get over it, and I did not want to get over it.
Right.
So I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life and my career, but I knew it was science. And when I was a senior in high school, my counselor, we get pulled out of class
Right.
for the
Yep.
counselor session, and they had us do that survey of like, what do you like in school? What do
Right.
you like to do?
Yep.
And it spits out a degree that you should pursue.
Yeah, right.
And mine spit out bioengineering.
Interesting.
And I had never heard of that before. I
Okay.
had no idea that you could solve medical problems from an engineering lens.
And you're in what year in school is this?
I think I was a junior.
So you're 17 years old, had
Yeah.
no idea that this
And
even existed.
Correct. And
Okay.
I was always a math and science kid, and I
Right.
had not considered engineering for myself until I learned that I could solve the problems I care about as an engineer. And so that's one of the things that SparkShop really works hard to do, is to tell kids, no matter what they're passionate about, no matter what they're already interested and excited on, no matter what worries them or what they want to change in the world, you can address those using technical skills in a technical career or in a career that will interface with folks in technical careers.
So we've talked about, and you've used the word inspiration a couple times, and inspiring young people toward these awesome careers. And is this now this experience that you had in high school, and you mentioned your co-founder Shonali Ditz, is that what inspired you to kick off SparkShop, or what was the inspiration?
That was part of it. So Shonali and I met because we were both involved in the Northwestern Formula Racing team. So this is an undergraduate student group.
Got it.
Mostly
Northwestern
engineers.
University.
Northwestern
Northern
University.
Illinois. Yep.
In Evanston.
Yep.
And we were part of this club where undergraduates buy a motorcycle engine and build a race car around it.
Okay.
You do it in a year.
Wow.
So you weld the frame, you develop the suspension,
Yeah.
you're doing all of the modeling, all of the manufacturing, all
Right.
the way through a competition in the spring. So it was super hands-on and super high. I wasn't getting excited about the problem sets in my fluid dynamics
Right.
class or even in the lab work.
Yep.
It was doing a real high-stakes hands-on engineering project in a team full of people who all had different skill sets and passions, and we all had to come together. So when we graduated, we went off and got engineering jobs.
Of course.
And yeah, as you do. And
Where'd you go? Where'd you start your career?
I actually started my career at a company called Microlution, which was acquired by George Fisher shortly after I started.
Got
I
it.
actually worked IMTS
Oh, yeah.
for that
Right.
company. So it's
Yeah.
full circle to be back
Well,
here.
and I've actually bought products from George Fisher
you
in my
have?
manufacturing days. Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
know the company well.
Yeah,
Yep,
so
go
I was
ahead.
doing micro machining there. We were using a femtosecond laser to do micro hole drilling.
Okay.
And it was a super interesting application.
Yeah.
And I loved the work. I was traveling internationally for work. I was working with people that were brilliant and interesting, and the work was dynamic and interdisciplinary. And at the same time, I would tell people what my job was or what I was learning in
Right.
school, and people would say, "Oh, I didn't know I didn't know that existed." I had my family, my friends from home, a lot of people seemed to not be aware at all of the extent that, like, the depth of the technical fields.
Right.
And so I'm having that come up over and over again. And at the same time, my company's trying to recruit and hire new folks. And we cannot find enough talented engineers to hire.
About what year was this, just so I'm kind of placing
This was 2016, 2017.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So 5-6 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so we were working really hard to bring in diverse candidates. And the talent shortage. So I'm feeling the talent shortage, and I'm feeling the somehow this is a well-kept secret, and it shouldn't be, right? So those were two things that kind of came together for us and inspired us to say, oh, we might be able to do something different in the engineering education space to divert young folks into these fields. Like, young folks deserve the opportunity to get these interesting, dynamic, collaborative, high-paying jobs. And yeah, exactly. And so we both feel like we kind of lucked into the engineering field, and you shouldn't have to be lucky to have the chance to choose that.
Well, and when you think about, industrial employers that are trying to get people excited about careers in manufacturing and careers in industry, you think about just all of these efforts around workforce. I mean, we still do have a lot of work to do, and you're doing incredible work. You just have to look back at we're getting everybody's cheering for the Tech Ed podcast here at the Smart Forest Student Summit, and we've got some students walking through, which is great. If you hear that in the background, we're happy to have you here. So you think about this is need to inspire people toward careers in advanced manufacturing, and you had to, like you said, you had to luck into it. You had to back into it. I told you as we were preparing for the show, my wife Renee is a biomedical engineer as well. A couple of things that you mentioned. First of all, you're in this program at Northwestern, building this car, doing things like welding. I mean, that's not biomedical engineering, right? I mean, I guess there's a connection there, but you really kind of found your way into some of this manufacturing stuff. And then, George Fisher, obviously, heavy-duty manufacturing environment. Tell us about the leap from biomed to manufacturing before we get a little bit deeper into what you're doing.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. I actually got into manufacturing because I needed a work-study job on campus.
Okay.
And so I originally got a job in the mechanical engineering department doing like filing and stuff. And that was great, but they did want me, like they wanted me on a schedule that conflicted with my class schedule. And I needed to find a new job midway through the year.
Yep.
And so I wound up getting a job in the on-campus machine shop as a student trainer.
Okay.
So that meant my job was helping my peers learn how to use the equipment in the machine shop.
Yeah.
So that they could do their class projects. And that turned out to be like my place and my people. So I was learning the manual mill, the manual lathe, the laser cutter. I didn't learn welding there. I actually can't weld.
Okay.
I did machining. That was my specialty.
We won't put you in a weld booth then while you're here.
Don't put me in a weld booth.
Okay.
But yeah, so I really found community in that space, and I found that the shop managers really took me under their wing and taught me everything I wanted to learn and more. They really let me follow my curiosity.
Yep.
And from there, I was recruited into the car team because they needed people who could run the mills and the lathes.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, what a great and just a circuitous route into the world of manufacturing, but really shows how it's a wide open space. Anybody is welcome. All kinds of aptitudes, all kinds of interests. We just have to get more people excited about and knowledgeable about these great careers, and that's a lot of the work that you're doing at SparkShop. So just before we get into kind of the world of the future, tell us about, if I'm a student, a 4th or 5th grade student participating in the great work that you and Shanelli are doing, what does that feel like? What am I up to?
Yeah, so our program evolved a lot over the years, but what it looks like right now, if you're a 4th grader, is you start the school year and your teacher receives a unit of curriculum from SparkShop. And then you receive a box of school supplies. Okay. So we do, one of the things that we found, we work with almost all, like 87% of our students come from low-income households, and one of the barriers to doing science education is that you need the right stuff.
Of course.
If you don't have the beakers and the everything else, you can't participate in the experiments.
Right.
And a lot of our schools don't quite have all the equipment that they need.
What a shame that is.
Isn't it? So what we've been able to do is fundraise, purchase those, pack them into individualized school supply kits, and then the students at the school get basically a present. They get to open up this box full of engineering supplies. In your own classroom, with your classmates, with your teacher, you learn design thinking at the beginning of the year, and then apply that to different careers. Okay. So we'll do mechanical engineering, environmental engineering, computer science, and computer engineering. So we'll biomedical, material science. We try to really highlight all of the different disciplines of engineering through this lens that no matter what you care about, there's a type of engineer that works to solve those problems.
Very cool.
And so that is really focused on hands-on work in the classroom. We want the kids off of worksheets, off of laptops or Chromebooks, building, prototyping, testing, failing, trying again, building that resilience, building those teamwork skills. I think compared to the regular school day, it feels a lot like a playful time as opposed to like a deep learning time, but that's often where the best deep learning comes from.
I'm your textbook hands-on learner, you know. I mean, that's just exactly how I am, and that those were I used to joke that my two favorite classes in school were art and gym, right? Because you actually got to do something. You weren't just sitting there listening or watching or what have you, and so you're creating these experiences for these young people. How many students have benefited from the program so far?
4,000 to date.
Wow.
Since 2017 when we started this full time.
Incredible. So 4,000 students who maybe had no idea that they could be a mechanical engineer, biomedical engineer, industrial, civil, whatever that endeavor is, now are aware that these career opportunities are available to them. Is there a geographical region that you're focusing on?
Yeah, so we serve schools all across Chicago.
Okay.
We are localized to the city limits, boundaries of Chicago, but we're neighborhood agnostic. So we'll teach anywhere there are students that are underrepresented in the technical fields.
Do you know offhand how many students are going to school in CPS, in the Chicago Public Schools?
I have no
Okay,
idea,
yeah, I
but
don't
there
either,
are
but-
something like 600 elementary schools in Chicago,
Okay.
and we are working with 20.
Okay, wow, so lots and lots of work
There's
that's yet to be done.
lots of work to be done.
Yeah, and you mentioned the funding, so where does the funding come from? Who supports this?
Yeah, so we are mostly grant funded
Okay.
or funded by private donors.
Sure.
Yeah, we've got a number of people who really deeply believe in the work that we're doing
Sure.
and know that you need to be making the investment early.
Yep.
Because it is important that we're investing in college and technical trade programs. It's important we do CTE programs and high school training. It's really important that you don't lose kids in the middle school confidence dip, but
Yep.
I think we need to be building them up even earlier because that pipeline needs to be filled somewhere. So we
It's-
really...
Yeah, it's huge, and I'm such an advocate for, for pushing technical skills further down into education. When we started, and at least when I started advocating for that 6-7 years ago, we had a lot of technical college instructors that was like, well, you can't teach robotics at the high school. That's our job. It's like, and it's like, no, you don't get it. Your enrollment is going to explode if we get kids excited about this while they're in high school. They don't even know you're there. Let's get these programs into high school. As you and I sit here in the Smart Force Student Summit and in the FANUC area, FANUC has done just a great job of doing that, and you're on exactly the right the right focus. So let's think about the future now. What does the future of manufacturing look like if we can get more of these 4th and 5th graders excited about careers in advanced manufacturing?
I mean, we all know that the more diverse your team, the more innovative your solutions.
Right.
That's very well studied.
For sure.
Yeah, and so my hope is that to solve the world's most pressing technical challenges, we are facing some really big technical challenges as a nation, as a globe.
Right.
I want to see, in particular, Chicago students, kids who are born and raised in Chicago,
Okay.
go through Chicago schools, do whatever education path makes the most sense for them,
Right.
and then bring their lived experience, bring their expertise to the spaces creating innovative solutions.
Yeah, when you think about securing the American dream for the next generation, that is exactly what it's about.
Yep.
It's exactly about getting these young people with, like you said, whatever your education pathway is, there's no good, bad, right, or wrong. What's important is that you're educated on the front end about what your possibilities are, and then knowledgeable on the back end about what that means for things like college debt, for things like salary, compensation. We can tell somebody to follow their dream, that's awesome, but if that dream doesn't lead to a family supporting job, they should know that beforehand and not afterwards.
It's about informed consent, right? We want our kids to know everything that is available for them so they can make an educated decision, as opposed to following whatever path is presented to them through TikTok.
Right. No, exactly. And I am a little bit of a fan of TikTok.
Oh, I
I'll
love
admit
it.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
great,
That's
but-
a little bit addicting, but
Yeah.
but exactly, we should go deeper than just what you can see in a 45-second TikTok in terms of career exploration and understanding what the future is. And so really, really important work that you're doing. I love to hear about 4,000 students, and that's great. Would love to hear about an individual student as well. Is there a story that you can tell about a student who went through the SparkShop program and was inspired toward a career in advanced manufacturing and engineering, what have you? Tell us how you're doing.
Oh, I love that. That's a great question. So I will say our oldest students are freshmen in high school.
Okay.
And we have not stayed in great touch. The pandemic made that pretty
I'm
tricky.
sure, yeah.
Especially because Chicago kids leave their school in 8th grade and head to a new one.
Okay.
So we are actually really working on staying in touch with our students going forward.
Sure.
And hired a full-time person to make sure that we know what our kids are up to and
Yep.
continue to support them. But there's a particular student whose story, I think, is a really nice example of what can happen when you give kids the agency within their own education. There was a little boy who lived on the south side of Chicago. He's
Okay.
in South Shore.
Yeah, not far from where you grew up.
On
the south side of Chicago, you're in the suburbs, but yeah,
not
right.
too far. And His name's Caleb.
Okay.
And Caleb, we went to Caleb's school and did an open invention program.
Okay.
So this isn't quite what we're teaching anymore, but we basically walked the kids through the design thinking process where they first identify a problem, empathize, brainstorm solutions, sketch, prototype, and test their idea. So Caleb, the way we present what's an engineering problem is anything that can be better in your life or anything you'd like to see changed. And we were really trying to do a product development boot camp. And Caleb insisted he wanted to work on gun violence.
Okay.
And I just remember thinking like, oh, buddy, like we're doing a product development class. This is a systemic issue. This is like a really heavy topic.
Right.
Like I don't even know that I can guide you through this process with my own, presence in your classroom. And so there was a lot in that. And he really wanted to work on it. And so we worked on it. And what he identified as the real problem is that people don't feel safe. People don't feel safe, and they want to feel safe.
Okay.
So we worked on that question. How might we help people feel safe without hurting each other?
Yep.
And what he wound up inventing was actually very cute. It was basically a full body slap bracelet that you could throw at someone and immobilize them without hurting them.
Yeah.
Right. It was a really beautiful solution and a really creative and playful solution to something that's heavy and big. And this kid is 10 years old, 9 years old.
Right.
And through talking with him a little more, he'd obviously had a personal experience with the issue. And one of the things that I find to be so powerful about letting kids pursue whatever it is that matters to them is that they're able to think creatively and imagine a different outcome.
Right.
Of the things in their lives that have been challenging or scary or just like a little too big for a 9-year-old to have to hold. And so I think that story is a really nice one that shows this child finding their own agency, imagining a safer and more just world. But we also have kids that like have a lot of sneakers and they have a hard time organizing their sneaker boxes in their closet, and like that problem is just as important to that kid. And so we really do try to make sure that our kids are able to work on whatever it is that matters to them.
Well, and it really speaks to the importance of having a more flexible education system. The importance of project-based learning. Certainly, you've got this boy with the full-body slap bracelet. I just love. You can totally visualize that, right? Yeah. You don't even have to see what that is, and it's just like you can totally see how that would work.
Yeah.
Brilliant idea. Yeah. Something that means something to him. And so on one hand, you've got just a really cool application for design and for technology. But think about what that student learned while they were going through it. So they had to come up with a problem. They had to ideate a solution. They had to design that solution. Somehow they needed to fabricate or manifest that solution. So they're learning all of these industrially relevant skills. That's what we do in manufacturing every day. We come up with a product idea. We come up with a solution. We test the solution. And in his particular case, something that was really meaningful to him, it wasn't just somebody else's idea of a project. This is something that he feels like is making a difference. So I think that's just a great example. And now you've got this 4th or 5th grade boy, and I'll ask, it's okay if you haven't, but do you know where he ended up or what he's doing, Caleb?
I do not.
Okay, yeah.
I hope he's good.
Yeah, I'm sure. And
I'm
absolutely.
sure he's good.
And he received that experience, and for all we know, he's a budding mechanical or civil or industrial engineer. Maybe we'll run into Caleb at some point in the future. So great story. You're here at IMTS, the Smart Force Student Summit. Why are you here, and how's it been so far?
Yeah, so one of the things that SparkShop is really prioritizing is trying to pour everything we can into our teachers.
Okay.
And back in the day, Shonali and I facilitated our own program.
Okay.
Asking a elementary school teacher to facilitate our program with all of the flexibility that's required,
right,
it's just a skill set that, especially if you are a teacher who doesn't, if you don't think you know engineering, you don't think you know manufacturing,
right,
how can you teach it?
Of course.
So one of the things that we have begun to do is provide accredited teacher professional development.
Okay.
And Illinois teachers are required to do professional development to keep
credit,
their license. Yeah. Exactly. So we've partnered with Northwestern University's School of Education and Social Policy.
Might have had a connection there, maybe.
We knew a few people.
Okay.
To get accredited professional development together. So what we did today was ran a professional development session called Maker Education Without the Expensive Gadgets.
Oh, nice.
Yep, because IMTS is a place full of these spectacular, exciting, but expensive gadgets.
For sure.
And for a teacher who comes here and is feeling inspired and feeling motivated, but maybe doesn't have access to this equipment quite yet, we want to show them the ways that they can bring maker education to their classroom today. So we focused on sketching and paper prototyping, which are things that cost $5 for a ream of paper.
Yeah, exactly. If you can find paper, you can do it. So that's just a great example. Pretty good feedback from the teachers that were here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think it's always fun too when teachers get to engage as learners themselves.
Right.
So often they're the ones responsible for facilitation, and so getting to be creative and be challenged to do the work that their students are challenged to do every day is like a nice brain break, and we try really hard to make sure that our teachers have something concrete that they can take back to the classroom right away. So I think they tend to leave feeling pretty motivated.
Yeah, it's really a great success story in terms of the way that you're motivating and inspiring teachers, the way that you're inspiring these 4th and 5th graders toward potential careers in advanced manufacturing, understanding what opportunities are there. In as much as we're at the largest industrial trade show in the Western Hemisphere, lots of excitement around manufacturing here, and who knows how many of those 4,000 students that you've inspired through your program, and I'm sure thousands and thousands more to come, right? I mean, this isn't, you're not done, you're just getting started. So who knows all the different lives you're going to impact over the course of time. So now your students, that maybe your early students, now freshmen in high school, let's turn the clock forward another 12 months. Let's assume they're a sophomore in high school, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid, and they come to you and say, what is that one piece of advice that you would have for me as I'm thinking about my future? Well, what's that piece of advice?
Especially for a high schooler, I think that's a hard question because they have so much discovery still ahead of them, and yet there's a lot of pressure to know what your path is going to be.
Right.
And so I think my advice is always to just hold that path loosely and to let yourself be open to following new curiosities and following the things that really excite you. That's what I've been able to do in my career, and I moved through biomedical, into automotive, into advanced manufacturing, into the nonprofit sector, and I am 28 years old, so we'll see how much more there is for me in my career. But my recommendation for a high schooler is always to find where they're curious, find where they're excited, and just explore it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is all about exploration, and I love the way that your students, even years before that sophomore year of high school, are finding ways to explore all these technologies and these experiences through the great work that's going on at SparkShop. Our guest today has been Tiernan Murrell, the co-founder and executive director of SparkShop. Just a really fascinating conversation, and somebody at 28 years old who 5 years ago saw this need, took it upon themselves to solve a problem. I'm sure it's not the last problem you're going to solve in your career, Tiernan, and it's been so much fun having you with us today on the Tech Ed Podcast.